Joining us now is Rick Gorka, a member of the Communications Department for the Republican National Committee. Rick, when we look at the campaign and how it's taking place right now, we know that in the past ads have still been a very big thing, but probably even more so important right now when we see the campaigns go more digital. When it comes into that type of debate as to how effective those can be, what goes into making this ad? Is it something that's usually more responsive, or is it something that comes out a little bit earlier in an effort to try to control the narrative?
With our data operation, we've invested over $350 million in that operation over the past few cycles. It allows us to be extremely precise and surgical with our messaging, targeting it specifically to voters who are receptive to that message. So we're allowed to able to look at voters and their messaging in real time and deliver a message to them through Facebook, Google Ads, whatever it happens to be, that prove to be most effective for them in that area.
And I think it is an effective way of doing it because I showed that Truth Over Fact ad with Tim Murtaugh in it, and it's a humorous piece. It's something that people actually may want to watch while at the same time getting the message across that Biden does have a history of making these gaffes, making mistakes, and maybe that's not someone you want leading you through a pandemic. But what you're speaking of right now, I think, is also interesting because a lot of the American people are wanting to hold China accountable for this current pandemic as well. And it does match up with the vice president's ties, the former vice president's ties to China, which plays into the Trump campaign's hands as well. Is that something that you see not only maybe a regional thing, but something taking place all across the country?
It's 100%. It's a regional. We're looking at states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, but really any state that's in every state's been impacted by the coronavirus. Every state has a message on China. And the fact is that the American people, you don't have to push them too hard for them to go, yeah, China's behind this. They're not our friend. They're more of an adversary. And we need to take a tougher line with China when it comes to not only protecting our jobs, but protecting the health and safety of our citizens.
I agree with you, and I think that polls show the same thing. Whenever you look at polls, they say that the American people want to hold China accountable, and it's something that they were saying even before the coronavirus outbreak. That's why the president's tariffs on China, for example, were so palatable, especially for farmers in the Midwest, steel workers, people who have been hurt by China's policies for the better part of 3 decades now. And when we look in the media, for example, they say they don't cover that. They'll say that it's the president deflecting away from his administration's accountability on this issue. And I think that's damaging for not only journalism, but also for getting a clear picture of what's going on right now. And I think that's the same thing with the Tara Reade allegations. They're not covering something that I think the American people want to know more about, and they're instead covering for Joe Biden. Do you think that's fair?
It's not, obviously, and that's why we have invested so much resources, time, and money into our field operation. Right now, we have paid staff in 23 states across the country. Over 1,100 members of our team are on the ground recruiting, training, and talking to voters directly about the issues that matter, bypassing the traditional media. We're able to communicate with our voters and the president's supporters and those critical swing voters that we need to win on Election Day about the message of what the president's accomplished, what he's done for the last 4 years, and what he will do for the next 4. So for us, we're able to bypass quite successfully the mainstream media and talk directly to the voters about the issues that matter the most.
And when I look at this issue, too, regarding Tara Reade, I think that it does spell a little bit of a recipe for disaster for the Biden campaign on a number of different fronts. For example, in 2018, something that really fueled the blue wave, if you will, was women. It was something that women came out. They didn't only run, but they also came out in the suburbs and voted for the Democratic candidates, and then also progressives as well. We saw that the progressive part of the the Democratic Party was becoming a more influential part of that base, and they're not necessarily on board with Joe Biden either. I mean, they may pick him over Donald Trump, but I don't think that they're going to come out in the same type of droves of numbers that they would have maybe for Bernie Sanders. Do the Republicans in the party see an opportunity to capitalize on that? Maybe reach out to women a little bit more this time around, maybe more so than they did in 2018 and 2016?
100%. What we're seeing from Joe Biden and the Democrats is a lack of energy, a lack of enthusiasm. And Tara Reade is the latest example that will continue to dampen the Democrats' chances of winning on November 3rd. What the RNC did today is we launched a 5-figure ad buy targeting the University of Delaware around those Biden documents because we know that the Biden campaign is worried about those documents that are housed at the University of Delaware. He sent operatives to the college just days before he announced his campaign to review what was there. So we're working on this aggressively. We're not going to let them get off the hook. despite the two standards of justice that the media seems to have. Justice Kavanaugh was dragged through the mud. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. That the coverage there, the bias is showing clearly. But again, we have thousands of staff on the ground, millions of volunteers engaged. We're going to get this message out to the voters and make Joe Biden own these allegations.
And even when you bring up Kavanaugh, there were polling at the time of the 2018 midterms that said even a lot of women did not like the way that was handled. They related it back to their husbands, to their sons, people that they loved, and they didn't necessarily like the idea of this man being essentially dragged in the public without due process, or even the fact of having that public hearing in general. I mean, I don't think we're going to see a Tara Reade hearing anytime soon, and I think that speaks volumes about what we need to know about what the media is doing with this issue. But Rick Gorka, really appreciate you coming on tonight, breaking down the state of this race for us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.